Welcome to another episode of As Chess Recommends. Today we are gonna talk about Vaudeville Villain by Viktor Vaughn, aka MF Doom. It's an album from 2003. It's one of his highly rated albums, and it came out in his maybe best kind of creative period. As his best period was like again 2003 to 2005, maybe, when again there was the King Ghidorah album first, then there was this one, then there was Mad Villain, which is the most famous one, and then there was also the Food album, which is really highly recorded. So this was an era when MF Doom was doing lots of great stuff, and this is one of his albums that he didn't produce the beats himself. Again, he did lots of production himself, but this was done by some pretty like fairly unknown kind of indie producers, but I think the production is really good, even though I like MF Doom's like own productions as well. And this is a concept album. It's about like a time traveling drug dealer character who is stuck in New York and stuff. So, but again, I don't know the whole concept because again, I'm not the kind of that good at like lyrical thing, because I'm more about the how it sounds than what it means. But that's the basic concept of it, and then each song like has a different kind of moment for this talk. Yeah, but anyway, what did you think of this album?
Oh, it's a really good album, and it's already growing in my estimation as some of the things you just mentioned, which I didn't know about the album, that what the potential concept is. So, I mean, this is very different from obviously most hip hop I've listened to, and obviously he has a cult following. It's he was kind of seen more as like kind of an underground purist kind of lyricist type artist who honestly I didn't listen to as much. I haven't listened to him at all, but even music like his kind of thing I haven't. So, but I really liked the production, like you said. I thought many of the beats were like really great and stuff like that. But in his lyrics, yeah, I was trying to get a sense of what he's trying to do. I did have trouble with that. I was like, what is he exactly trying to do? There are a lot of like brilliant lines, and there's a lot of everything in there with bars and lyricism, but then I'm like, what overall is he trying to do? Because clearly he was like a very intelligent person, so I'm like, so there must be now layers to what he's trying to do, which I can't fully grasp. So I'm looking forward to discussing it with you.
Yeah, so the lyrics, yeah, it's like again about a drug dealer who gets in to New York. His time machine has broken or something like that, and he has to be in New York, and again he only wants to rap and then sell drugs basically. So it's very vulgar in that way, and it's maybe one of his more aggressive and vulgar albums. And of course with MF Doom there's always these references, these weird references to superheroes and pop culture and things like that. And again, the Viktor Vaughn is again his alter ego, and he's the drug dealer, but he has like many different alter egos, of course. Like again, I mentioned the King Ghidorah, that's like a Japanese type of monster, Godzilla type of thing, and so he loved this type of idea to like have these alter egos and explore different types of personalities. And of course, there's this one track here where there's these female vocals as well, and there MF Doom is like Viktor Vaughn, and then he's talking like to his girlfriend or whatever. So we see these kind of like actors and personalities from the features as well. And of course there's the open mic night songs, and those are quite fun as well. And then the production, like it's fairly experimental and weird, but then there are moments where it sounds a bit more kind of just classic stuff as well. So there's an interesting mix, and some of it sounds like very electronic, and then there are some really weird sounding samples here and there. But overall I like both the lyrics and the production, and also his flow. But the lyrics here are a bit different again than in many of his other albums that are often maybe a bit more humorous and go even more with the pop culture references and stuff like that. But of course here there is humor in this album too, but not as much as in some of his other albums.
Okay, yeah. I mean, you're mentioning a lot of interesting things and like things that I actually, also, had some thoughts on. But I was curious about one thing. How did you discover kind of MF Doom's music? Was it like kind of recommended to you, or were you just kind of exploring? Because I was really curious of like how you kind of found out about the artist and what kind of got you into his work.
Yeah, I got into him like in 2021, and he obviously died in 2020, I think October. And he was like only 49 or something, so he died way too young. But I think I just saw it in many like Mad Villainy album was the first one I listened to, and that's often these days in all of these like music nerd lists of like one of the greatest albums of all time. It's always like next to like Radiohead's OK Computer and albums like that music nerds listen to. So I think I just discovered it from one of those lists, and then I decided to listen to it, and then I've slowly listened to some of the other albums too. And he's definitely an artist that I need to be in the mood for, so I don't like put these albums on like every week or even every month. And I think with this Vaudeville Villain album, like before I decided to recommend it, I had like over a year break from listening to it at all. So I don't like listen to MF Doom like all the time, but whenever I listen to him, I always realize that these albums are so great, and they are some of my personal favorites, this one and then the Mad Villainy one. But definitely I don't listen to it as much as like to Pimp a Butterfly or Danny Brown and some of these other hip hop artists. But yeah, he's definitely one of the more interesting rap artists. Like lyrically, his lyrics are very dense, and I also often have kind of hard time to get the kind of meat of the lyrics, as I'm just not used to analyzing hip hop lyrics that much, because to me it's often just about the flow and the beats and the sound, even though I know that the lyrics is one of the more important things about hip hop. But yeah, they can be very dense in MF Doom, especially when there are lots of these superhero references and stuff that I don't like know those references that well myself.
Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Obviously, yeah, same as you, I kind of came to know of him more recently. Of course, yeah, there was his passing, and I kind of knew of him a little bit before the passing, because obviously when there would be discussions about, great hip hop artists, his name would kind of come up. And then I learned a bit about him and, how he, was kind of someone who liked to perform, not necessarily, okay, every artist is taking on a persona, especially even in hip hop, but he was making it more obvious by creating personas to say, it's kind of like Godard and all this kind of stuff, where he's kind of saying this is a performance, or this is an expression, but this is an expression from this perspective. So he was going a step further, which in hip hop wasn't really the case. It was all about you being you and what you're seeing and being authentic and being very true to your story, which of course is like when we sit there and talk about documentary and say, oh, this documentary is the truth. But then people who know about filmmaking say documentary is a film. It's documenting things, but it has elements of film and elements of creativity, and even it's trying to make a certain point and making you feel a certain way. So it's not at all a 100% depiction of truth per se, in that sense. So in MF Doom, having that awareness made me very curious, but I still didn't get around to really exploring his music till now. And right away, just the title intrigued me, because it's like Vaudeville Villain. Obviously, vaudeville being this kind of variety show meant to be kind of entertaining, and almost escapist, or even in some ways caricaturish, humorous. So that some of his intentions there. And then if you think about someone who performs in vaudeville, they're vaudevillian, and he's vaudevillian, and all this. So he's already doing wordplay with the title. So I was like, okay, clearly he's going to be trying to do something. And so when I listened to it, I could get that sense. I could really pick up on the humor. I was like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of this is funny. He is being satirizing. He's presenting these characters. He's even in a way almost taking the landscape of hip hop and so calling it kind of like vaudeville because of these characters. And you can see that in some of those open night skits too. So because the people are performing, they're clearly aping certain categories of style. Like there's the slick drug dealer guy who's like sounding very much like a Jay-Z, like an early Jay-Z. So I'm like, okay, this guy's trying to be a Jay-Z. And then there's a guy who's kind of trying to sound like a Jarl Pak kind of thing, like really aggressive. And then there's this guy who's trying to be very woke, and not even woke, but very like introspective and very like conscious rap. And then there's a guy who's like clearly sounding like this surfer dude, and who's like, the weeds I spoke is strong like horsehair or whatever, like being kind of ridiculous. So I'm like, okay, he's doing some really clever, interesting thing. The one song that I had a definite trouble with was the one with the female vocal, Can I Watch? But now that you mentioned that he's this character and he's from the future, which makes sense because he uses the word flux capacitor from Back to the Future. Shout outs to Tony and Back to the Future. So I was like, okay, he's being a character with that, because I found the guy a bit sleazy, the way he's interacting with the girl. And I was like, I'm not really feeling this, and this back and forth battle of the sexist stuff, I don't really like that much. But based on what you're saying, that track is starting to seem more interesting to me than I initially thought.
Yeah, and of course, all of his personalities are basically villains. Of course, like the famous album Mad Villain. Yeah. Like, yeah, he does that kind of villain personality. But this Vaughn alter ego seems to be like maybe the most vulgar of them all. Like, again, like he doesn't really have any morals or anything. He's just a hustler who just, again, sells drugs and raps and meets women and stuff. So yeah, it's just this alter ego being the villain. I don't think he's like talking about his actual self here, but just the alter ego.
Yeah, I definitely get a sense of that. I definitely felt like he's being a villain, but he's being cartoonish, like you said. So if he likes these superhero stories and all that stuff, he's being cartoonish or even caricaturish, like this exaggerated version of this villain. And okay, I'm going to play this villain that you all love so much, but by doing it in this cartoonish, caricaturish, humorous ways, I felt like he's making a point. Like in that way, we only do this to kind of entertain. There's not authenticity there. And indirectly, he is doubling down on his authenticity as an artist if he's able to bring to light kind of the facade aspect or the fronting aspect of, like, we're all playing, but who are the people underneath? Like, this is extreme to have someone to be that callous, where he doesn't care about this, but we present that front and then we create that story, and then why are we doing it? It's kind of like vaudeville. It's a form of vaudeville that we're doing it. So I think it's really great. But like you said, technically it's excellent. Like, his flow is excellent. There's no doubt about it. His flow, if it's just about the flow and the beats and the, just, yeah, it hits. It's really great. I love that intro track. It just sets off the album. Like, it just brings you right in, and very aggressive.
And of course, it starts with this kind of sample that sounds like an old, like comic book cartoon thing, like the villain thing, like villain soundtrack thing. So it kind of instantly sets out the alter ego in that way.
Yeah,
And of course, his music is often very theatrical, even whimsical. So it's almost like a play in a way, that there are all of these characters talking and having these conflicts and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of the writing and lyricism, having listened to the album like quite a few times, you can even identify now. You know, they're always talking about like rhyme schemes and internal rhyme schemes, and I don't go that deep into it, but I started to notice, oh, he actually has rhyme schemes that go across songs. You know, there's certain words, and he is rhyming across songs, so he's keeping a thematic unity throughout the songs. Like again, like you said, so making it very clear, like it's performance, it's like theater. Yeah, it's great artistry, and it's definitely expands the bounds of like hip hop in a way, because yeah, he's doing something way more different than how most people would be like approaching an album. Yeah, it's quite ambitious.
And I think I'm gonna again later on recommend some other albums from him. I think the Mad Villainy album is like absolute must listen. It's just so highly rated these days, and that has the Madlib production. So you obviously liked Madlib's production in the Pinata album that we talked about a month ago. So that will be interesting to talk about at some point.
And some of the vibe in the album made me feel of like, you know, when you're young and it's like Saturday morning and you're like sitting having like the sugary cereal and like watching a cartoon. Like it almost like create that world of like, you know, imagination, and then him doubles down with this point of this being almost like an imaginary world, but it's also the real world. Like we also know that we're not making up about some of the things that happen. They actually happen. So it's an interesting, again, like thing he's trying to say about authenticity in art. Yeah, really liked it.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see, because you hadn't listened to MF Doom before, so I'm not sure whether this was a good intro. Maybe the Mad Villainy would have been a better intro, but I felt like going with this one. So, yeah.
And I could see some of his influences. Obviously, he's in this album, at least, he seemed influenced by the Wu-Tang, you know, sound, and of course, they also blended this whole martial arts film and cartoons and comic book stuff into the music and all that. So he's definitely following that tradition. Sometimes his flows were very, and I don't know if, like you're saying, if he's doing performance, I don't know if some of those things are very selective because he's trying to connect with certain elements of hip hop. So sometimes he'd be like flowing like almost like the Notorious B.I.G. And I was like, okay, like, is it because he's inspired, or is he kind of, that rhyme kind of fits part of a pocket of rap he wants to kind of talk about and help us kind of analyze. So yeah, that's very cool. I could see his influences. The very New York sound, Cop Killer Queen. So he's very much letting you know, I'm in New York. This is where I am in New York. What's the attitude? What's the vibe? But is he from New York?
Yeah, I think he is. But
was he from New York? I mean, sorry.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is, but I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But his flow changes a bit, like from album to album, because again the productions are very different as well. So again, he didn't produce this himself, but many of his classic albums he produced himself, and then Mad Villainy has the Madlib production, so that's obviously quite different. So even though it's from the same era of hip hop, but it still sounds quite different.
Yeah. And he makes some comments in one of the songs too about his anonymity. I think they're like, he makes these comments, or like someone commenting and being like, oh, no one knows who he is, or something like that, or whatever. Like this. his anonymity and who's the person behind the artist and all that stuff. Yeah, very cool stuff. Very cool stuff.
And of course, he's used to be this big underground darling, but now if you look at Spotify, for example, like 8 million monthly listeners, so he seems to be fairly mainstream now. So, but of course, like throughout the years, people like Kanye and lots of like very big rappers have talked about how much they love MF Doom, but I think again in the past years his popularity has just grown and grown.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing because he was representing a kind of. It's too bad he didn't get that level while he was alive, but I think he's creating a tradition that I hope that could be very interesting if people listen to and start getting inspired by it and start following it in hip hop, because he's, like you said, he is constructing his, at least from this album, like very differently, and he has a kind of thematic approach, and so he's adding new dimensions to the kind of performance of hip hop as well. So I think, yeah, that's a definitely good sign that more people are listening to him, and one of them is me, thanks to you.
And this was already like critically acclaimed back when it came out, but again, not that mainstream. Although I think it made like Billboard Top 100 or something. So it wasn't like it's like totally unknown or anything back then, but not mainstream either.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think the first, when I even saw the cover, like even of Mad Villainy, is when I was living in Southeast Asia, and I just started like collecting vinyl, and I would go to the shops and I saw that image of his mask, and I was like, who's that? Yeah. Like, I've never even heard of this artist before, but he was already kind of in those circles, like the vinyl collecting circles, and in like Southeast Asia and all this stuff. Like, people knew him quite well. So I was shocked. I was like, oh, I've listened to hip hop, and I thought I knew everyone who's kind of in there, but I've never seen this artist or this artist. So that's really cool.
But yeah, this was an interesting chat. The next time we will have more hip hop and more weirder hip hop.
Yeah.
It's Danny Brown's Atrocity exhibition, which is very experimental, very hardcore in many ways. So we'll see what you think about that. Yeah.
Looking forward to it. Yeah. Another artist I haven't listened to, really.
And after Danny Brown, we will move away to other genres for a while. So after that, we have a couple of jazz albums. Let My Children Hear Music from Charles Mingus, and a masterpiece in my opinion. Then after that, we will have a bit lesser known free jazz classic, Sam Rivers' Crystals. And then after that, back to classical music with Chopin's Ballads. So yeah, that will be fun.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Chopin is one of my favorite classical composers, so it will be great to talk about.
Yeah, I think this whole journey has been very interesting, because as we are exploring all these things, I feel like it's doing something mentally as well. It's like stretching exercises almost. So it's like now when I watch the films or I listen to the music, there are all these things I'm thinking about that I don't think I was really thinking about or observing or taking a note of when we initially started. So I really appreciate that. It's really great.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks for watching. Look out for more episodes. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.